Welcome, welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Our talk today is on the kidneys, regulating mind, prana, and the living fluids. Our speaker is Dr. Olixn Adams. Dr. Adams is a board certified practitioner of family medicine and practices holistic medicine at Southern Coast Hospital in Bandon, Oregon. He synthesizes the principles of Ayurvedic medicine and osteopathic medicine to provide a deeper understanding of physiology, spirituality, and the wholeness of life as it pertains to health, healing, and well-being. He's a faculty member of the Biodynamics of Osteopathy program and lectures internationally, teaching osteopathic medicine to physicians from around the world. Dr. Adams is also the director of the Pranada Wellness Center. Pranada Wellness is currently offering educational talks like this one, as well as hosting an annual week-long healing immersion at the Temple of Compassion in Burton, Texas. If you are interested in an event like that, our next in-person healing retreat with Dr. Adams and a team of amazing osteopathic physicians is happening in April. It's going to be April 11th through the 17th at the Temple of Compassion. You will have the attention and the care of physicians, Olixn and his team of physicians. There will be Ayurvedic therapies, really amazing educational programs, and all kinds of other good things happening. I think we just put a link to that in the chat. We have a few spots available, so if that interests you, please check it out. And we'll be sending another email about it soon. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Olixn. Olixn, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Let's take a moment and just close our eyes. And with deepest love, thinking of the breath of life, our gurus, saints, and sages. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Namavitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I humbly bow to the breath of life. I bow to God, the Creator. I bow to my Guruji, my Gurudev. I bow to my teachers of medicine and healing. I bow to the saints and sages of all religions and all times. And I humbly bow to the divinity within each and every one of you. May we study well together. May we learn much together. May there be no disagreements between us. And may all that we learn together be for the benefit of all mankind. Om, Amen. Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening. It's nice to see everybody. We have people joining from all different corners of the globe. So here where I am, it's morning, and for some of you, it's evening or afternoon. And it's so nice to spend some time together and discuss these beautiful topics regarding this body temple. We're planning to discuss the kidneys today. They are a mysterious organ, and they have a tremendous influence on the organism for such a small gland. They exert a tremendous influence throughout the whole system. The primary function, when we just think of the kidneys globally, is the regulation of the fluids, but it's actually much more nuanced and much more complex than that. Regulating the fluids, well, we are primarily a fluid organism. We are 60% water, but even beyond that, if we think of fluid as being also a protoplasm, we're largely a protoplasmic organism, largely a fluid organism. So regulation and control of the fluids has a tremendous impact on our entire physiology and, in fact, our entire mind. We could think of the protoplasm as a medium for prana. It's the medium through which the prana expresses. It's also the medium through which the mind expresses. And last time, in our last discussion, we talked about the heart and the heart being the root of the mind channel. And now we're talking about this channel expressing through this whole protoplasmic substance that we call the human form. So the kidneys regulate the internal environment and also respond to the external environment. So we have prana responding to prana, prana on the outside and prana on the inside, communicating, prana communicating with prana. The kidneys are really two glands that function as one. So we have the kidneys, which are small bean-shaped organs. They're retroperitoneal. They're on the back side of the peritoneum, sitting in the low back in the lumbar spine. And right on top of them is two small glands called the adrenal glands. And adrenal is easy to remember because ad means to add, and renal is kidney. So they're additional glands to the kidney. And they're encased in one continuous fascia. They have the same nerve supply, the same blood supply. So they functionally operate as one function, one organ. The kidneys are responsible for a tremendous amount of our biochemistry and our physiology. They regulate water metabolism, and so naturally they have a large impact on ojas, which is the most essential substance related to our immune system, our sense of well-being, our sense of peace, and our vitality. They have a large impact on blood chemistry, bone metabolism, survival instinct, willpower. They impact our intellect and our intelligence. Um, the prana of the kidney fills the brain. In fact, in Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, it's written in their texts that the kidney jing fills the brain. So we could look at that as the prana of the kidney fills the brain. And we see this commonly in clinical practice. I remember a recent case. We had a patient come into the hospital. He was in his 80s and had a little bit of dementia, but generally was functioning quite well at home. Suddenly, he was completely confused. He couldn't speak, he couldn't think straight, and they thought he'd had a stroke. So they did a CT scan, and the brain looked normal. There was no evidence of a stroke. So we admitted him to the hospital, and under further evaluation, we found two things. He was in kidney failure, and his sodium had dropped quite a bit, and he was dehydrated. So he had not been drinking enough water. His kidneys went into some failure, and his sodium dropped. So as we corrected the sodium, his mental function improved a little bit, but we didn't really see the full improvement until his kidney function started to resolve and improve. So right away, we saw this connection between kidney prana and function of the mind that extends beyond the biochemistry, that extends into the more subtle aspect of who we are and the essence of the prana that's the background of all of our physiology. So we really need to pay attention to all these levels of life when we're taking care of our patients. The kidneys also affect our sex drive and our vitality for that reproductive energy. Their influence really extends into the whole body, the whole physiology. And this is in part because of the fact that they communicate through hormones. They don't communicate so much through uh, the nerves, but more through hormones. And hormones are messenger molecules that are created and then sent out through the bloodstream and influence all the different cells through all the different organ systems. So they're able to broadcast their communication and their response to the whole body quite quickly. And they're responding to both the blood chemistry and the outside environment. So there is a deep connection between the heart and the kidneys. In fact, when we look at cardiac output, 25% of the blood goes to the kidneys directly. That's almost more than any other organ and many of the organs combined. So a large part of the blood is going directly to the kidneys from the heart. And it's not just blood, because through this pathway is also traveling the prana. So we have this connection of blood and prana to the heart, from the heart to the kidneys, and the kidneys to the heart. The kidneys make at least five hormones, maybe six, that have a direct influence on the heart, a direct communication with the heart. It can tell the heart to increase its cardiac output. It can tell the heart to help raise the blood pressure. A large portion of this blood is not because the kidneys need so much blood for their well-being. It's because the kidneys are monitoring the blood. The kidneys are sensing the blood. They're looking at the blood pressure, the volume, the electrolytes, the acid base. All of these different physiological functions are constantly being evaluated by the kidney. And then the kidney sends out various hormones and messages to the rest of the body, telling the body how to respond. And it's also addressing the electrolytes. So it's addressing the level of fluid in the blood and the sodium and the potassium and all of the electrolytes that are so important to our physiology. So let's look a little bit at the embryology of the kidneys. You guys know that I like to look a little bit at embryology, because when we look at how any form or function starts and creates, we understand a little bit better its nature and how it functions, and its importance, and how to communicate and how to relate to it. This will be kind of a simplified version, because the actual embryology of the kidneys is quite complex, but we're going to really simplify it to a couple of the key highlights that I think are important when we consider the function of the kidneys, the care of the kidneys, how to take care of these important organs to support our overall health. So the kidneys start to develop just before the heart, and they're largely influenced by what's called a suction field, and that relates to their filtration process. So the kidneys are filtering things out of the blood, and then through a collecting system, they go through a duct and then drop into the bladder. And this is apparent in the very early stages, where a suction field is created. And this suction field has an interesting response, where it actually allows the kidneys to sort of enfold on themselves like this. So the outside becomes the inside, and the inside becomes the outside. This is important because it's communicating to us that the deep inner part of the adrenal glands and the kidneys is in deep communication with the external. So this ectodermal outer layer of the embryo becomes the inside of the kidneys. So from the very, very early stages, we have this relationship of the outside to the inside and the inside to the outside. And that's a really important principle. So we have this suction field creating this enfoldment through the suction that then connects into the collecting ducts. It's kind of a folding in on itself or a wrapping around itself where the outside becomes the inside becomes the outside. The other, I think, real important thing to understand embryologically about the kidneys is this collection of a very specialized type of cell called neural crest cells. Neural crest cells. These are really specialized cells. Their nature, if we were to think of it Ayurvedically, is vata. These are vata cells. They're highly migratory. They move around. They like to communicate. They often then give rise to nerve cells, and they have the capacity to transform themselves into different types of specialized cells once they get to their location. And they arise off of the edge of the central canal embryologically. So we have this embryo that's creating, we have this embryonic disc, and the breath of life breathes into this disc and creates a line right down the middle that we call a midline. And that becomes the notochord, which eventually becomes the spine and the brain. And right along the outside of that notochord are these neural crest cells, and they can migrate anywhere in the embryo. They move around. The largest collection of these neural crest cells happen to be in the medulla of the adrenal gland. So, in the center of the adrenal gland, sitting on top of the kidneys, is the largest collection of neural crest cells. If we understand the nature of these neural crest cells, we understand the nature of these adrenal glands. It's like a mini brain inside of the adrenal glands. A large function of these neural crest cells is then to develop into nerves. Well, like I said, these neural crest cells can become many different types of cells. So when they get into the center of the adrenal gland, they give up their property of becoming a nerve and transform their identity into being a secretory cell that can secrete hormones. So they say, okay, I'm here in the center of the adrenal gland. I'm no longer going to be a nerve cell, although I have a deep connection and a deep relationship with the sympathetic nervous system. My job now is to secrete hormones. And the primary hormones they secrete is adrenaline, epinephrine, adrenaline, norepinephrine, and dopamine. Okay. Adrenaline is involved in fight or flight. Adrenaline is involved in activating the nervous system and preparing the entire organism for fight or flight. Adrenaline is an incredible molecule and it can be an incredible medicine. It saves lives when people are in anaphylactic shock, for example, and swelling is going on everywhere, inflammation, and maybe the airways getting compromised. Anaphylactic shock, you may have heard of this term from being exposed to something. Adrenaline is the antidote to that in microdoses, very small doses. It's given. Adrenaline affects every single cell in the body. It has an effect on every single cell, and very small concentrations go a long, long way. And adrenaline activates the central nervous system and it diverts blood from the internal organs to the large muscles, and it puts us in a fight or flight mode. It prepares the body for an emergency. So these cells are producing adrenaline in response to the outside environment, to the information that it's receiving from the external environment. They're like a mini brain, and they're organized around survival. They're organized around producing epinephrine. And then the outer portion of the adrenal cortex, the adrenal gland, produces cortisol. So cortisol is another stress response molecule. It responds a little differently. Epinephrine is very fast. It's fast on and fast off. Cortisol is made from a different group of cells. It's part of the adrenal gland, but embryologically, these cells are coming from the mesoderm, so the middle layer of the embryo. They have a different personality. They're slower, slow on and slow off. Cortisol is also anti-inflammatory. It's also a stress molecule, but it works much, much slower. It works by going inside of the cell and telling the cell what to make, what to do, and how to perform. Epinephrine stays on the outside of the cell. Epinephrine is a vata molecule. It doesn't have time to go inside of the cell. It's not interested in taking up residence inside of a cell. It wants to communicate with the surface of the cell and then move on and do its job somewhere else. It's very vata in nature. Cortisol, much, much, much slower. So we have high concentrations of cortisol and epinephrine being made by these adrenal glands. So it's like a mini brain. That's fundamental to the survival, the nervous system. It's designed to convert perception into immediate whole body action. It's central. It's a central gatekeeper between fear, physiology, and the mind. So these cells are responding to your mind. These cells are responding to the internal environment and the external environment. In our last discussion, we talked about the heart, and we mentioned that the heart is kind of where our consciousness expands, right? When we enter into the heart and the heart opens, the nature is expansion, right? The adrenal gland and the kidneys, especially related to the response to fear, stress, or threat, is where the consciousness actually collapses into survival. So when we're oriented to the adrenal axis, the consciousness contracts. The mind becomes narrow. It's focused on survival. We're focusing and functioning off the lower mind, off of survival, off of the brain stem. Everything is organized at that point around survival thinking. When we enter into the heart consciousness, everything expands. It's about expansion, love, inclusion. And we talked about the bioelectric field that's created in the heart and that expands out and touches other people's bioelectric field through a process called balanced rhythmic interchange. So this consciousness is much different. It's also important because when there is a true emergency, we want to be able to respond appropriately. We want the adrenaline to increase our strength and to have a very focused mind on what is needed in the moment. But when there's not an emergency, we don't need or want to be in that state of consciousness, in that state of thinking. And this is where we can get into trouble because there is a lot going on in this modern world that supports the consciousness to activate the adrenal complex and not the heart complex. There's a lot going on. We'll see if we can explain that a little more clearly. The other important thing to think about or to conceptualize this whole conversation of embryology and even the adult form is occurring in an ocean. It's an ocean of prana. Okay, this prana is everywhere. Gurudev has a combination of books that have been compiled. It's called The Ocean of Divine Bliss, right? The Ocean of Divine Bliss. This ocean is an ocean of prana, and we're all in the same ocean. We're all in this ocean of prana. We're sharing the same ocean, right? So all of this embryology is occurring inside of this ocean, and it doesn't go away. Even right now, as we sit together, we're in the same ocean. This prana is affecting us. We're part of this ocean. And I bring this up because I know there's a lot of people that have joined us today that are involved in the healing arts. They're either practitioners or doctors. And how we conceive or think about the patient greatly affects the outcome. How we think or perceive even the people that we interact with affects the outcome. As our attitudes, so will be our results. So we shouldn't isolate our neighbors, our friends, our patients, our clients. We shouldn't isolate them from this ocean of prana. We should acknowledge that we're sitting in the same ocean of prana together. They're not separate from us. We're not separate from them. We're connected through this prana. This is a really important way to think about our fellow man, especially if you're involved in bringing any type of healthcare or healing or medicine. Because if we isolate them from their natural environment, we're going to limit the capacity of healing. And we're not seeing them for the totality of who they are. So, two things we should do is we should seek to see the health and the perfection in them because it's always there. And we should seek to remember that we're in the same ocean of prana together and nobody is isolated from this prana. You can't be isolated from this ocean in which this whole story is unfolding. And this ocean of prana is supporting us all the time. It's holding us all the time. It's passing through us all the time. It's sustaining us. This breath of life is a real thing. Krishna prana, Shakti prana, the breath of life, many names from many traditions for the same thing. It's passing through us all the time, creating, sustaining, and destroying. And it's the true medicine. Any other medicine that we provide is simply bringing about a balanced state or a neutrality that allows the breath of life to actually do its work. The breath of life is the one true healer, and we need to remember that. And we need to remember that there's something perfect in everyone. We call it the health. It's always there. And our job as healers is to find that and to communicate that and to relate to that. Dr. Still, the founder of osteopathic medicine, said anybody can find disease. The true physician finds the health. The true physician finds the health. So our job is to find this perfection and cooperate with it. So how we conceptualize, how we think about the patient is very important in leading to that. And same with our attitude. As our attitudes, so will be our results. I've seen this prove out many times in many ways, our attitude. Even in writing a prescription, I've noticed if my attitude is one of love when writing the prescription and inclusiveness, it seems that the potency is better than if there is any type of negative attitude. This can be for a pharmaceutical medication or even and especially herbal formulas and herbal remedies. feeling the essence of the prana of the herbal remedy and connecting it with the patient as a prescription is being written goes a long ways towards their benefit. I remember early when I was first out of medical school, and I really didn't like writing prescriptions for pharmaceuticals. I always felt like I was failing somehow, but that's kind of polarized. We don't want to get polarized. Medications are also useful. But as I changed my attitude and started to undertake it as an act of service and love, I started noticing people coming back and saying, "Well, I used to need 25 milligrams of this, but now it seems like I only need 12.5 milligrams or 10 milligrams." So I started to notice this connection between the attitude of everything that we do and the results that we see in the life. And this is because of the prana. This is because of this ocean of prana that we're all in. So these neural crest cells that are highly concentrated in the kidneys and the adrenals, they are highly specialized and they have an acute sensitivity to everything on the outside and everything on the inside. They actually they actually pick up on the uh, the essence or the movement of the prana on the outside before our conscious mind does. They're responding to the outside, but below the level of thought sometimes. Our mind has a big impact on the function of the adrenal glands and the kidneys, but also the external environment, the prana, the 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 prana when there's a danger, it'll create a lateral fluctuation across the transverse axis of the kidneys. And then the kidneys will start a response. The adrenal glands will start a response based on this fluctuation of prana. I've seen this prove out in the natural world. Um, I remember one time I was out surfing in the ocean and was pretty relaxed when suddenly there was a shot of adrenaline through my whole system for no apparent reason. And I sat up and looked around, and it turned out there was a shark nearby. There was a shark very close. So my adrenal glands and these specialized cells, these neural crest cells in the adrenals, picked up on this predator energy, picked up on the change of prana before my conscious mind did. And there was a shot of adrenaline. I was highly alert, highly focused. I sat up, I looked, I saw the fin of a shark, and of course, I immediately came into shore and alerted the other surfers. But it demonstrates that these cells are sensitive to the prana inside and outside of the body. And so they're picking up on dangers and changes in the environment that are below the conscious mind. But they're also picking up on uh, the thoughts and the mind itself. So the adrenals can't necessarily register whether a danger or a risk is real or imaginary, or even something that you're just reading about. So if you're on the internet and reading about some very disturbing story in the news, this will have an effect on your adrenal glands, and they will respond in kind because they don't know if the threat is something you're imagining, something that's real. Sometimes they're picking up from the outside, but often they're picking up a response to your thoughts. So the thoughts have a big effect. The kidneys also have a big effect on the bones, a big effect on the bones. For a lot of reasons in a lot of ways, not just the way that the prana is organized, but biochemically. Vitamin D, for example, there's a very complex process the body goes through converting the D that we take into the bioactive form. It's a process that I can't even fully explain because it's so complex. But I can tell you the last step is in the kidneys. The kidneys are involved in the last step of making the bioactive form of vitamin D, which then has a big impact on how calcium is absorbed and how the bones are affected in terms of building bone or breaking down bone. The kidneys are also involved in the balance of the calcium and the phosphate involved in building bone. And they'll have to sometimes pull some of that calcium and phosphate out of the bone if the blood is too acidic. So, one way to kind of look at this is we're a fluid organism, and the bones and the creation of the bones is actually a crystallization process within a fluid matrix. So bones are actually living crystals that are always changing shape in response to the demands put on them based on the exercise and the activities that you're undertaking. The bones are constantly remolding their shape. They're a living, conscious, crystallized substance that occurs inside of this living matrix of fluid that we are. We're this beautiful matrix of protoplasmic fluid that then can become crystallized or denser or more fluid. There's this play of more fluid to more crystallization. And the kidneys are the big regulators of this crystallization process of forming bone and regulating bone. So for an osteopathic physician and an Ayurvedic physician, we'll often look at the kidney health when we're treating osteoporosis. We're not going to zero in just on the bone. We're looking at the whole patient. So we have to look at what is the function of the kidney and adrenal gland when looking at the health of the bone, when looking at conditions such as osteoporosis, osteopenia. We have to start with looking at the whole patient and then looking at the kidney health and does it have the capacity to regulate this formation, this crystallization process. Very, very important to look at it through the lens of the whole. Wholeness is so important. So these these kidneys and adrenal glands are so important to our health and so important to the regulation of the entire fluid matrix. And this fluid matrix is then the medium for the prana and the medium for the mind. So the mind is affecting the kidneys and the adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands are affecting the mind. It's a reciprocal relationship. So if you have questions that come up as we're talking, you can put them in the chat, and in a few minutes, we'll um, come to addressing uh, some of the questions. Let's uh, let's change our conversation a little bit and look at the care of the kidneys and the care of the adrenal glands, how we can support their health and well-being. Well, we said the kidneys are the regulator of the fluids. So obviously, proper water intake would be very important. So what is the proper water intake? Well, not too much and not too little. And I'm not being sarcastic, but from an Ayurvedic standpoint, we can't give an absolute quantitative amount of water because it's based on your dosha, it's based on the season, it's based on your Agni, and based on many factors. But we can say when your Agni is strong and your doshas are in balance, the thirst instinct will give the proper amount of water. Water is medicine. Too much is not good, and too little is not good. So when we're in balance, we can rely on the thirst instinct. The problem is we're often out of balance, and then the thirst instinct may have been suppressed for a period of time, and it's not as reliable. But basically, if we have a reasonable balance and a good Agni, when we're thirsty, then we should drink. Right now, I'm a little thirsty, so I'm going to take a sip. So that's a key principle to Ayurveda in any aspect of health is not to suppress the instincts. When you need to void, you void. When you feel hunger, you eat. And when you feel thirsty, you drink. This keeps us in balance. But even more importantly than the uh, timing is the timing of the water intake is even possibly more important than the quantity. So it's good to drink a cup of room temperature water when you first wake up. That's a really good time to get some good water intake in. It wakes the kidneys up. It gives some fluid to begin flushing the tissues, and um, warm water will start to activate the digestion and the peristalsis. Then between meals, we should drink some water as per our thirst. With meals, we want to minimize the water intake because we don't want to suppress the Agni, the digestive fire. So a few sips of water when we're eating to help with swallowing is fine, but you don't want to have large quantities of water right before a meal, during a meal, or right after a meal. We also don't want to have large quantities of water right before sleep. This will weaken the metabolism and tends to increase the kapha. So the proper water intake is also dependent upon your dosha. Vata needs more water. They tend to do better with some sips through the day. And really, a Vata dosha should avoid carbonated water because that's now you've added a Vata component to your water, which we're trying to reduce in a Vata dosha. The Pitta dosha tends to do best with a moderate amount of water. And the Kapha dosha, of course, requires the least amount of water and generally doesn't do well with sipping water all day long. The Kapha dosha can really rely a little bit more on that thirst instinct and drink when they're thirsty. Standard allopathic medicine says most adults need 1.5 to 2.5 liters of water a day. That again is just a guideline and really too simplistic when we consider the whole human being in the context of the seasons, the activity, the state of the Agni, the doshas. We need to get a little more sophisticated. Some signs of good water intake are also helpful. If your urine is clear, probably getting enough water. If it's dark or yellow, might not be getting enough water. If your digestion is good and stable, you're probably getting enough water. If you're getting constipation, can be a sign of not enough water. If your energy level is fairly steady, good sign you're getting enough water. If you're getting afternoon fatigue, you may check and see if you're not getting a little dehydrated in the afternoon. And then your kidney energy may be getting a little depleted, which has a lot to do with our stamina and our ojas. You can also look at your tongue. If there's coating on the tongue, it may be a sign that you're a little dehydrated. If the saliva is clear and viscous, good sign you're getting enough hydration. So these are all signs that you use yourself, that the prana, how the prana is communicating to us whether or not we're getting enough water, because your water intake is personal to you, to your physiology, to your activity, to your physiology, to many, many factors. So it also helps to kind of think about what are the primary causes of strain on the kidneys. Um, Overwork, too much travel, too much stress, dehydration, fear, trauma. Basically, if we were to synthesize all of that into one word, vata, so vata aggravation is hard on the kidneys. So taking care of the vata, which is said to be the king of the doshas, you have to manage the vata to have the other doshas in balance. That principle applies to everything we've talked about, and especially to the kidneys. Another stress on the kidneys is when we suppress the natural urges. We already talked a little bit about that. If we suppress the thirst reflex, if we suppress the urge to urinate, this is hard on the kidneys. This creates strain on the kidneys. Um, Excess uh, consumption of stimulants, coffee, energy drinks, these are hard on the kidneys. The energy drinks stimulate the production and release of the epinephrine, of adrenaline and cortisol. So you're releasing more of these stress hormones when you consume these energy drinks in high doses of caffeine. Um, Long exposure to cold or drinking too much cold drinks, iced drinks, this is also hard on the kidneys. We should try to keep the low back and the kidneys warm. Sleeping on a cold floor, or people go camping and don't have the proper camping pad, and then they are on the cold ground and the low back, it's cold and stiff. This is hard on the kidneys. Um, if our digestive strength is weak, this is hard on the kidneys. This principle, of course, applies to anything we talk about. A fundamental principle of Ayurveda and osteopathy is a strong digestive system leads to good health by preventing the accumulation of ama or toxins and by allowing us to extract the prana and the essence of the food to nourish the basic tissues and the organs. So strong digestion really supports the kidneys. Too much salt is hard on the kidneys. Too much protein intake, too much of drying foods, too much of the vata foods is hard on the kidneys. So in short, balance the king of the doshas, balance to the vata dosha will greatly help your kidney health. Rest. Rest is very important for the kidneys. Now, rest does not necessarily mean sleep, right? Now, sleep is important, but some people sleep and they don't rest. Rest is a natural process. Rest is a state of repose. Rest is an attitude. And we've talked before about the natural pauses that occur in the natural world. These pauses are part of rest. So when a pause arises, when the prana comes to a little pause, a little rest, that's our opportunity to rest. And there's these pauses are built naturally into the world, into the natural world. Right before sunrise, there's a pause. Midday, there's a pause. Right before sunset, there's a pause. If you spend time in nature and get quiet, you'll notice these pauses. Um, Here in the desert in the summertime, when we're out walking, right about 11 o'clock, 11:30, there's a pause, and you can really appreciate it because the circadians, these really noisy cricket-like insects, are humming away, making this incredible symphony of noise. And all of a sudden, collectively, they just stop and everything gets quiet. Everything gets still. This is a pause. And if we synchronize with these pauses, we are resting. It's a natural rest, and the prana resets. And this allows the kidneys and the adrenal glands to reset themselves for the next event. Because there's times in life when the adrenaline naturally spikes due to a response to life, but it needs the opportunity to reset itself. And that's what's missing in our world today. The pace is so fast. We're missing the pauses. We're missing the opportunity to reset for the next event. We're so absorbed in technology. We're so absorbed in these cell phones and constant influence of movement and motion that we're missing our opportunity to rest. We're missing our opportunity to pause. You get stopped at the stoplight when you're driving, we get upset. I got stopped at the stoplight. If you look at it as a pause and just take a moment to pause, it's actually can be a beautiful thing. You get to the grocery store, and rather than be frustrated that there's a line and break out your cell phone and start scrolling the internet, take it as a pause. Take it as an opportunity to be present to the moment, to be present to your breath, to be present to the natural cycles of life. I know it sounds simple, and it is simple, but the simple is sometimes the most powerful and the most beautiful medicine. It'll do a tremendous amount. So rest is it's a state of repose. It's an attitude. And if we just take a pause for a moment, even right now, and acknowledge that there's a place within us that is built for rest. You know, in the scriptures, it says, my father's house has many rooms. And if we take the house to be this body temple that we're inhabiting for a period of time, there's many rooms. And one of the rooms is just for rest. And you don't have to even know where the room is. The breath knows where it is. And if we just get synchronized with our breath and appreciate the breath and just ask the breath to take you to this place of rest, it'll start to move you into this room, into this perceptual space where you can start to feel a sense of rest. Even right now, in this moment, even though I'm still talking, even though we're still sharing time together, we can start to do that sharing from a place of rest, from a place of peace and calm, just by acknowledging that there is a room for that. And we can go more deeply into that. This rest and this synchronization with the pauses helps to reset and reestablish the normal cycle of the cortisol. We talked about cortisol earlier, and cortisol has a normal cycle. In the when we first wake in the morning, it rises and it starts to rise and peaks around midday and then slowly starts to decline into the evening. And that's a normal cortisol curve. What can happen in chronic stress is that curve becomes flat. And it becomes flat in one of two ways. It can be flat set too high, so you're in a constant cortisol state that never peaks or drops, or it can be set too low and you're in a cortisol depleted state, but it's a flat line. There's not a rise and not a drop. The other thing that can happen, especially for people that work a night shift, is that curve can get flipped. So now it's low in the morning and midday, and then it rises in the evening and drops in the morning. That's a reverse cortisol. These people have insomnia, their sleep-wake cycles are disrupted. They'll often say, I'm a night owl. Maybe, but generally that's saying that your sleep-wake cycle is reversed. Your cortisol curve is actually flipped, and we need to help get it reset because this human organism is designed to be active in the day and rest in the night and the evening. And this has a lot to do with the hormones of cortisol, melatonin, and other hormones. They've actually done studies, and people who work a night shift have all-cause risk of disease. Any type of disease, any type of health challenge is greatly increased for people who work nights and sleep in the day. So if you are on night shift, then you need to take extra care of your vata dosha and extra care of your rest and sleep wake cycles because there are people doing very important work at night. You know, the nurses in the hospital, all on night shifts, emergency room doctors who cover only nights. It's a tremendous service and sacrifice, but they have to be extra careful and cautious of their ojas and their kidney prana. So those are a few things to help. Basically, getting in touch with the natural world, getting your feet on the earth, barefoot on the earth. We're absorbing the electromagnetic fields of the earth. They rise up into the kidneys and deeply, deeply nourish the kidney glands. They receive a lot of energy from the electromagnetic field of the earth, the air, the sunshine, getting in touch with the natural cycles of nature, all support the kidney glands. And reducing our time on social media, especially internet surfing, especially the news. These news channels like Yahoo and Google News, they're all based on algorithms. And those algorithms are designed to trigger your adrenal and designed to trigger your dopamine release. They're not designed to bring you news. They're not designed to support your health. They're designed through algorithms to trigger your adrenaline and trigger your dopamine and to create this need and the desire for something more, and that more is never delivered. So it becomes this endless cycle of surfing. I see a lot of teenagers and kids and even adults that are so tuned into that phone that and they're constantly scrolling, reading news story after news story. This is feeding information into these um, cells in the adrenal gland, and they're responding to it. They don't know that these messages are coming just from you reading the news. They think there's an emergency. They think there's some profound disturbance all around you. And it starts to release a tremendous amount of adrenaline and dopamine, which is then elevating your cortisol, which is then throwing off your cortisol cycle, creating a constant state of alertness, a constant state of stress, and never allowing us to pause, never allowing us to truly rest. So take a fast from the news, take a fast from the internet surfing. The internet can be a powerful tool if you need to send an email, communicate, or do some research. Wonderful, do that. But do it, get done with the work and get out. Don't keep surfing the internet for more news, for more stimulation, for more input. You're only causing more stress to your entire system, to your entire physiology. And this is very hard on the health. We're not made to receive this much input constantly. We're bombarded with information, constantly bombarded with more information than we can digest or assimilate. So, one thing you can do is take back control of this information. You don't have to rely on Yahoo News or Google News for the news and the information. You can actually create your own news feed. There's really nice not website, but platforms such as Feedly or other ones where you tell it where you want to pull the information from, and you can now create a more balanced source of news that is tailored to a state of balance instead of leaning far one direction or another direction. So you can tailor your news to come from the sources that you choose in the amount that you want and the topics that are most important to you. And then it'll create a little uh, brief, basically, a daily briefing for you to review if you choose to. This is a much more healthy and balanced way to absorb the news, to absorb the information, than being constantly bombarded by the internet with so much information. And so often it's just the same story again and again, repeated in different ways. It's not good for our health. So we need to take back control of the information that's coming into our system, into our field. Okay, so that's my soapbox message for the afternoon. Um, a few supplements that can help. Um, I'm a big fan of ashwagandha and holy basil. These are wonderful adaptogenic herbs. Holy basil, maybe around 300 milligrams twice a day, very nourishing, very adaptogenic, as well as ashwagandha. Holy basil can be a little on the warming side, so if you have a tendency towards a lot of heat, a little more caution with holy basil, but in small amounts, very supportive to the kidneys and to the whole fluid system. There is a supplement called L-theanine. This is a amino acid. It comes from green tea. It's not caffeinated. It's an extract of green tea, but it is an amino acid. It's very calming to the nervous system, very supportive to the adrenal glands. Um, 200 milligrams 3 times a day. Very helpful. Some people find they get into stress eating, right? So they're under constant stress and then they crave food and they eat. This helps to ground the excess vata. So it's actually an expression of health that's gotten out of balance. But for stress eating, there's a combination of herbs of magnolia with felladronin. Magnolia and felladronin. Around 250 milligrams 3 times a day will help with those stress eating responses. We talked about the cortisol curve, and some people are flatlined and low cortisol levels, so they're always tired, they're always suffering some brain fatigue, brain fog. They can't wake up in the morning. They tend to feel better in the evening than the morning, and the cortisol curve is low. You can get adrenal glandular extract. Um, this would be for non-vegetarians. If you're vegetarian, this is not a good option because it's the actual glandular extract from an animal such as a pig or a horse. But for those that aren't vegetarian and are in a cortisol depleted state, will sometimes use this. This is kind of a last resort. 200 milligrams in the morning and early afternoon. These glandular extracts come in two forms. You can have whole gland, which includes the medulla and the cortex of the adrenal gland, or the adrenal cortex only. If there's no anxiety and it's just low cortisol, you use the whole adrenal extract. If there is anxiety, you'll use the adrenal cortex uh, version. And we talked about embryologically, the personality, the expression of these two aspects. So it ties back to that. The adrenal cortex coming from the mesoderm embryologically, being slower, smoother, and the uh, adrenal, the medulla aspect being coming from those highly specialized cells that are very vata in their nature. The neural crest cells are in the medulla, so you're getting more adrenaline with that. So that's the reasoning or the rationale behind that recommendation. Glandular extracts, I don't use them a lot, but once in a while they're helpful. I prefer to start with our lifestyle and then go to our food and then to our herbs and then to our supplements and follow the natural movement of the prana. So that's close to an hour discussion on that. Why don't we see if we have any questions that we need to address?
Thank you so much, Olene. We have many questions, so I'm hoping that we have enough time to address all of them. I'll start with the first one that came in. This person is asking if you have been in a hypervigilant state all your life due to maybe trauma in your childhood and living in a traumatic environment, how can you reset your kidneys, your adrenals, if you've been in this state for over 50 years, for example? Is the damage done or can it be reversed?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful and important question. It's not a permanent damage, but it does have a big early developmental trauma has a big impact on us because these neural crest cells are developing, maturing, and creating their natural environment early in our development, embryologically and in early childhood. And when there's a lot of trauma early on, it tends to set their tone at a higher baseline. So they are uh, more responsive to stress. They're more quick to respond to stress, and it sets the whole threshold at a higher level. So being aware of that, first off, is important. Being aware that that is there. From there, we want to really uh, establish an environment that is disciplined around a stable routine. So we stabilize our routine into something that's comfortable, not a lot of irregularity. So we have a stable routine. We stabilize the vata dosha through all of the things we talked about, from the diet to the lifestyle. This is very important. Then, if you have the opportunity to work with an osteopathic practitioner, we have treatments that work with the fluid field that supports the kidney, the prana that supports the kidney. We bring that to a state of rest, and slowly it begins to reset into a state of rest through osteopathic treatment. Also, if you have an Ayurvedic practitioner near you, they can also help a lot with helping you to establish a lifestyle and a routine that stabilizes the prana that is influencing this axis that's around the transverse axis of the kidney and adrenal glands. This becomes very important. Taking time to really be with the breath and watch the breath and not try to change the breath, but just appreciate it. Getting your feet on the ground and on the earth and just getting barefoot on the earth, staying warm, keeping the low back warm. Really, all of these things that we talked about earlier are going to support changing that cycle. It's not something that is stuck permanently. It's something that does require care throughout the rest of our life, but it doesn't mean that we have to be stuck in a fight or flight response. We can heal out of this pattern, and that's a lot of the work that we do in um, osteopathic treatments and Ayurvedic treatments and counseling is to bring restore this balance. So take heart and work on balancing and managing the vata dosha, creating a sense of stability and safety, and allowing yourself to feel this ocean of prana that we're in right now, allowing that ocean of prana to suffuse and to hold you. You are held by this prana all the time. When we get into fight or flight, we cut ourselves off from that perception. The perception of fight or flight is very narrow, and the perception of love is more expansive and broad. So as you begin to think more about anything that you love and get that sense of the heart opening a little bit, then we begin to feel the ocean of prana and we feel it holding us and supporting us and passing through us and around us. So you're feeling held all the time. This is really important, is that sense of being held, which is always there. It's a matter of opening our perception to it. Thank you for that question, and we're praying for your continued healing, which will happen and is possible. And you're welcome to join us at Pranada, and we can work on that even more, or we can get you a referral to practitioners in your area to help. You'll heal.
Thank you so much, Aline. Our next question is asking about if you have a single kidney, maybe you're missing a kidney. What does this affect? What are the effects of that in relationship to the wholeness?
Yeah, so some people are born with one kidney, um, and that kidney functions as if it was two, but it's one. And some people have lost a kidney due to an injury or an illness, or in some cases, I've known of patients that donated their kidney to a loved one for a kidney transplant. And in cases of losing a kidney or donating a kidney, we have to take now extra care to maintain the health of the remaining kidney and support it because now that single remaining kidney is trying to do the job of two. So it becomes even more important to take care, to get plenty of rest, to avoid overwork, to avoid fight or flight type of response by paying too much attention to the news or being in stressful situations, making sure that we're adequately hydrated. We can adapt and accommodate to this, but we need to continue to take care and really support that remaining kidney. hmm It's very common, right? We see it quite a lot.
Thank you. Our next question is asking about cleansing the kidneys. Is it better to cleanse the kidneys first, then the liver, or the other way around?
Well, when it comes to cleansing, the first thing we need is to optimize our agni, our digestion. And so that's going to favor supporting the liver and the agni before undertaking any further cleansing. And this really is best addressed with a practitioner one-on-one because it's going to be very individualized to where your health needs lie, what your prana is expressing, what your dosha is, and the state of your agni. But the general principle is going to be strengthen the agni, strengthen the liver, make sure you have good elimination through all the channels of elimination, including the large intestine, and that you're not constipated. And from there, you can begin to look at targeting specific organs if needed based on the individual need.
Thank you. Our next
Mhm.
question is about the effect of alcohol on the kidneys.
Alcohol is primarily metabolized by the liver, but alcohol also has effect on antidiuretic hormone, which then affects the fluid balance. So we tend to uh, eliminate more water by nature when we consume alcohol because of the effect on antidiuretic hormone and the effect that that has on how the kidneys respond to the water that's in the plasma. So generally speaking, you need to consume more water as you consume alcohol to maintain the proper fluid balance. Uh, People often will get a headache after consuming alcohol in the following morning. Part of this is dehydration. So if you do choose to drink alcohol, make sure that you're increasing your water intake to account for the excess water that's going to be eliminated. So the excess urination that occurs with consumption of alcohol is not just the alcohol being eliminated, but it's also additional water being eliminated because of the effect that alcohol has on antidiuretic hormone.
Thank you. This next question is probably from a physician. They're asking for a CKD patient. Can you please suggest the best diet to take and what strictly to avoid?
CKD stands for chronic kidney disease, just for everyone's sake. So how specific you get with the diet depends on the stage of chronic kidney disease. You've got stage 1 through 4. 4 needs the most attention to diet. Stage 1 needs less attention to diet. General principle is to uh, avoid too much salt and too much protein. How much is too much is going to be tailored to the individual. Especially as you get into stage 4, you tend to be more cautious of the amount of protein that's taken in. That's a general guideline. To get more specific, you want to be one-on-one with the patient and practitioner.
Thank you. This next question is kind of about, I think, the thirst urge. They're saying that they're not thirsty, but when they do drink more water, they tend to have a healthy bowel movement. What's going on? You might have already spoke to this before.
Right. So the natural urges can get disrupted, right? So every urge, thirst, hunger, urge for urination, defecation, they can all be disrupted or suppressed or aggravated. For example, when we're under constant stress, it's not uncommon for the hunger reflex to get suppressed initially as we have more cortisol and more adrenaline circulating in the system. The prana is naturally diverted from the digestive system, as is the blood, and is diverted into the large muscles for action. So initially, you'll have a suppression, but after chronic stress, a condition of chronic stress, the hunger reflex can be aggravated, where now we're eating, stress eating, it's called, where we're not truly hungry, but we're eating because we think we're hungry. So that's a disruption of the natural urge. The same thing can happen with the thirst reflex. If over enough time we didn't take some water when we had the thirst reflex resets to a higher level. And now we find that we're not naturally thirsty, even though we're a little bit dehydrated. That's why we talked about the signs and symptoms of dehydration, being the color of the urination, the urine, and the evidence of constipation, the mucous membranes. If you're seeing signs of dehydration, then you need to increase your water intake and allow the natural thirst reflex to reset itself, which it will with a regular balanced intake, it can reset.
Thank you. Our next question is, how does fasting affect the kidneys?
So fasting actually does create a small stress response. Um, there's a big movement right now with intermittent fasting, which can be beneficial. Fasting has a place in our spiritual life. Fasting has a place in our overall maintenance of our health and our body. But it needs to be addressed intelligently. If we're in a vata aggravated state, or we're in a heightened stress state and releasing a lot of adrenaline and cortisol, fasting is going to increase that. So then we need to be cautious with how much we fast, how long we fast. So again, it becomes personalized. Understanding that fasting can be beneficial, and understanding that fasting does create a small stress response. And stress response is not necessarily bad. We're made to have some stress on the organism, but we're also made to be able to reset that stress. It's when the stress can't get reset that we get into trouble. So if your system is in a state of chronic stress, chronic vata aggravation, then much more caution with fasting, probably shorter periods, um, maybe 8 or 10 hours at first, so that not to aggravate more the vata aggravation, not to aggravate more the chronic stress response. So it has to be titrated, has to be adjusted to each person's individual circumstances.
Thank you. We have a few more questions. I'm going to combine a few of them right now. One person is asking about getting nauseous during a workout. Is that related to cortisol? Another person is wondering how to test the best way to test cortisol levels and the adrenal health.
Cortisol can be easily tested through the urine, and usually it's tested a few times through the day so that so that we can get a sense of the cortisol curve, because equally important to the cortisol is not just the level, but its capacity to have its curve of rising in the morning, peaking midday, and then slowly decreasing. So usually cortisol is a urine test, and your provider or practitioner should be able to set it up for you, and checking uh, usually three times. Three time is pretty standard to get a sense of the curve. Um, Nauseous while working out can suggest a vata pitta aggravation. So making sure that we're not getting a blood sugar disturbance, a little bit of gentle food before an intense workout is helpful for people that get nauseous when working out. Often helpful, not always, but often, especially if we're getting a pitta aggravation. So if the constitution is pitta, and now we get moving and the vata comes up and the pitta comes up a little more, we get a nauseous response. And so we can combat that with a little bit of lemon honey water before a workout, or a small amount of soothing food, something that's not too hard to digest, something that's not too heavy, but maybe a little piece of fruit with a little bit of peanut butter or almond butter, or a little bit of water with honey, something that brings some soothing nutrition to the system will often reduce this nausea that comes with the working out.
Thank you. And there's just a few more questions. One was about the news outlet, kind of the curating your news outlet. Wanted to know the name of the outlet you mentioned. Another person was asking about the dosage of L-theanine, if you have suggestions.
L-theanine, 200 milligrams 3 times a day. Um, One platform is called Feedly, Feedly. There's other platforms, but Feedly basically allows you to tell it what sources you want it to pull from, and it allows you to tell what topics you're mostly interested in. So you can say, I want a balanced intake. So it's not just Fox, it's not just CNN. You can pick from the BBC, you can pick from different news outlets to try to get a little bit more balanced input. And then you can specifically target the topics you're most interested in. You can even have it pull from obscure journals or different sources that suit your interest and your temperament. And this will create a news feed or an input that's not just a constant input from one source.
Thank you. On that same note, do you think it's a good idea to take like a fast from technology occasionally?
Oh yeah, it's very, very good. Yeah, get the cell phone away for a day, or just take a break from the news for a couple of days. I've noticed for myself, I don't even look on Yahoo or Google News anymore because it's all algorithm based. It's not supporting my health, and it's not even bringing me a true balanced intake of the news. All it's trying to do is keep us hooked in. So I try to be selective with my news sources. It's a food, and food is medicine. So what we're reading is also a food. What we're consuming from our environment is also a food that's feeding us. It's all part of the prana. So we need to get selective, not just about our food, but we need to get selective about the company we keep, about the news that we read, the books that we choose to read. All of this is having an impact on our mind and our prana and our kidneys and our adrenals and our our overall health. So take back control of the news. Take back control of the information that's uh, being input into your system, because the information is powerful. Knowledge is power. Information is power. We're not saying to put your head in the sand, but we're saying let's get selective. Let's get intelligent. let's take back the control of the news input and create an environment that supports us, that informs us, that's not trying to deplete us. It's just trying to keep us constantly stimulated. That'll have a huge, huge impact on health, on sleep. That's one thing I try to recommend to most patients, especially if they're reporting insomnia, chronic stress, burnout, chronic fatigue, chronic inflammation, chronic pain, all these chronic conditions. The ojas is depleted, the vata is aggravated, and it's only getting more aggravated by a constant bombardment from the culture about news that is not supporting us. Spiritually, ultimately, we're first responsible for everything from our midline to the horizon, right? Our midline to horizon is our natural perception in the waking state. And so that's our first responsibility. Um, and that's a lot right there. Taking responsibility for our neighbors, taking responsibility for the water in our environment, the air in our environment. Now our horizon is actually artificially enlarged when we start to consume all of this news. So now we have a horizon that is on the other side of the globe. Well, that can be useful and is important, but if it becomes our permanent fulcrum, if it becomes our permanent reference point, we're out of balance with how we were made to interact with the natural world. And that's to have a deep and meaningful relationship with our midline to the horizon, perceiving everything from our midline to the horizon and all of that prana, being in relationship with that is our first responsibility spiritually. From there, we can expand it, but we have to have permission and the capacity to reclaim our natural horizon. And we cannot do that when we're inside of the phone and our whole focus is inside of this little box, but perceptually it's expanding us and it's confusing the perceptual mechanism. It's confusing the ocular vestibular reflex, it's confusing the prana, it's confusing all of our perception, which is huge. As we spoke about last year, our immune system is directly connected to our perception. Perception and immunity go together. And so when our perception is off, when our perceptual field is deeply affected and disrupted, it affects our immunity. It affects our ojas. It affects our prana. It puts us in a state of chronic inflammation and chronic stress. So we need to take back control of this environment and reclaim our natural environment. This technology is a tool, but the tool is only as useful as the operator. So take responsibility for the tool and use it intelligently. Don't let it use you. This will have a huge impact on your health, on your sleep, on your state of well-being, on your inflammation. I could go on and on. I guess I'm passionate about it because I think it's having such a huge impact on our health.
Thank you so much, Oli. So many words of gratitude are coming through the chat for this talk. I think it has touched and moved everyone. If you have any closing remarks, we can close up now.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been nice to see you and share some time with you through the ocean of divine bliss and the prana. I've enjoyed our time together. I hope to see some of you at the Pranada program this spring or at any of the meditation programs that we gather at. You're all in my heart and my prayers. I'm praying for your health and well-being. And we'll go ahead and close. Om Purnamadaha Purnamida Purna Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamavavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.